Yeah, and now what he's doing is he's narrating back to you.
Yeah.
And that's where when your kid is able to then narrate what's going on around you, that helps you to see that this is effective. They're now able to see these things as well. Erin, there are a lot of things you do with our kids that I disapprove of, but there's one thing that you've been doing with our kids in their education that I really approve of, and it's called narration. So when it comes to literature, you do this thing called narration. So I want you to explain that, like explain your secrets, Master Jedi.
So glad you approve, and I've been waiting for that.
Well, I was just thinking of what's a creative, honest way to introduce today's topic.
Okay, so narration, which is something we're going to expand on, but narration.
The basic narration in literature.
Oh, what I do with the kids with books.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's just, and I do this with our Bible reading. We do this with our Bible reading, but also, with our homeschooling books. So it's just the telling back of what you've heard or read or whatever. And so it's just a telling back of whatever the content is, whatever's happening. So instead of, preaching back at the kids, this is what you should have gotten from this Bible story, or did you notice this in the book? And usually there's a nudge of like, did you notice how selfish this character was? Does it remind you of someone like yourself or something like that? It's just teaching kids which actually the point of narration is to teach kids skills. One of those being to pay attention, and then the other to be able to tell back. And then, of course, you're learning all sorts of things by paying attention and telling back.
Yeah. And way more effective than book reports?
Yeah, I would say so.
How about
definitely.
dioramas? Remember when we used to do dioramas? You get a shoebox, and then you'd tell you do some kind of scene from, that was very effective and remember it. No. So anyway, narration is an effective tool, just as our kids engage with different literature. But we've kind of taken that idea and extrapolated it and applied it to life in general with kids. And I want to read from Deuteronomy Chapter 6. There's this passage in Deuteronomy 6, right? You've got this great passage in verse 4. God says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," and then goes into the great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and with all your strength. And then it says in verse 6, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts." But then verse 7, it says this, and a lot of parenting books or Christian parents will point to this as maybe instruction for us in discipling our kids. Verse 7 says, "Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." Right? And there's this idea that you have God's commands and God's laws just written on your life all over. And
they're like infused in every area.
Yeah. And you're talking about them with your kids throughout the day. And there's an intentionality there. And I think that's all good and important. But one of the ways that we, I think, have done some of this, because this idea of teaching your kids as you go, impressing on them God's commands as you go, you think about it, it doesn't maybe necessarily feel as natural when you read that. Like, how does this get woven into the fabric of our lives as we try to disciple our kids?
Yeah, I think, on that, I think we hear that, and then it's like, okay, do I literally paint it on my door frame? What does that actually mean? Does it mean when a situation comes up and we're in the car, like hopefully we have our Bible so we can pull it out and read a verse to the kid, and so does it mean that, like, in a literal sense, you're just constantly pointing to Bible verses when situations come up, and it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and it's probably, to answer that question, it probably is. It's both and. There is a literal sense where, hey, I think in our homes, thinking about how we decorate our homes and in the art that we frame and hang up on our homes, there might be a central command, like the great commandment, that we get done in a very, on a nice print that gets framed and is prominent in our home, so that God's commands are actually hanging on our walls, right? But then beyond that, how else do we do this?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the art of narrating comes in. And this is something that we've practiced as parents with our own kids. If you think about the definition of narration or narrating, right? The act of narrating is just telling a story. It's telling a story. And so, and that's what you're doing in literature. But that's what we're doing in real life as well. As we live life with our kids, we tell stories as we go. And of course, when I say stories, I'm not talking about like Once Upon a Time. I'm talking about the story of reality, if you will, to borrow a phrase from Greg Cochle in his book. The story of reality is unfolding all around us. God's reality is a part of that. His moral reality is a part of that. And so as we are living life, we're trying to tell those stories as they happen in front of us. And of course, think about it. Whenever you tell a story or you narrate something, the more detail that you give, the more insight you give, just the richer and better that story is. Okay, so that's the idea. Now apply this to life. What are we talking about? We're talking about when we're out with the kids, narrating what's going on around them. And I think maybe the most helpful way for maybe parents to see this and how we do it and how it can be a tool for discipleship is just by giving some examples of things that we're talking about here. So for instance, let's talk about some of the specific examples that kind of stand out for us. But I remember being with the kids, parking in like a Target parking lot. I think it was a Target, and we park. Everyone gets out of the car. It was you, it was me, and I think it was all the kids. We all get out. Everyone we kind of wait as people get out of their car, and as the kids are getting out of the car, and I'm kind of standing there waiting, a homeless guy approaches me, and he asked for money. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you need? I could go in right now and buy something that in particular that you need. And his response was just like, oh gosh. And it was frustrated. I don't need that. And he just walked off. Right. And then the kids came out, and it was a perfect time to narrate what just happened. And so the kids asked, hey, who was that? I said, he was a homeless guy, and he was asking if I could give him some money, some cash. And I said, look, we're supposed to help people, right, who are in need, and to be charitable and to give, charitably to people. And so if he had a real need, I was willing to help in that situation. But I asked him, hey, what do you specifically need? I can go into Target here and get it for you. And he just threw up his hands, and he was frustrated, and he didn't want that, and he just walked off. And so then it gave me a chance to talk to the kids, and I asked the kids, well, now why do you think that was his response, right? And so we had a conversation about what this guy had done. So I kind of just narrated the situation to them, what had happened, and it ended up being a teaching time to talk about how we love our neighbor, but how we at times use discernment and wisdom. And why might someone reject an offer of charity if he had a need for something? I was willing to go buy it for him. Why would he reject that? Well, hey, we're fallen human beings. Fallen human beings have things that sins that appeal to them, addictions, those kind of things. So we get to talk about that, and it ended up being this teaching time that I narrated. I told the story of what kind of happened and as it unfolded, and kind of went into the details. And it was just it's a real teaching moment to disciple our kids in the Christian worldview.
Yeah, which reminds me of another time also at Target. We go to Target a lot, but two of our kids were with me. They were little, and an old man approached me and said, "Oh, my wife is sick and she's really hungry, and I need money for food for her." And I didn't want to give him just cash, but I said, "What kinds of food does she like? And I'll go into Target and buy whatever it is you need." And he, in a similar way, got frustrated. "Oh no, I can't do that." And then he walked away. And so again, just this was another time where, I said to the kids as we were walking in, if his wife, because they had heard the interaction, but I said, "Now, do you think if he really had a wife who was starving and sick, and I offered to buy him whatever she wanted, do you think if that were true that he would have said no to that offer?" And they thought about it and said, "No, he would have." And then I said, "So why do you think he said that?" And then we had a good conversation from that. And so I think, just taking those moments to narrate a little bit of like what happened, and then then leading into why would that happen. And this is really, I think, how we narrate, and then it leads to these conversations of why is how we teach kids how to think about things, not just what to think. Because our kids, we've taken them actually just last month, they were at the we're in Orange County. The Orange County Rescue Mission isn't far from us. We were there with the group doing food stuff. And the people who work with homeless in our community actually say, please don't give people who ask for money. Help them in other ways. Do charity in other ways. So our kids have heard this before and know that, but we want them to be charitable people. So then how do we do that? And how do we think about the people who need charity? Yeah. So it's these kinds of life situations that come up that we can use as times to teach our kids how to think about something.
Yeah, and there's there's an immediacy there, and there's a real life is playing out. So it creates a really great teaching moment versus me sitting the kids down at the table and saying, "Okay, I want to talk to you kids about charity today and how we are to treat those who are in need," right? I mean, here's a real live moment. It's a real living illustration. And, another way that we've done this is with just technology. Technology is pervasive, right? It's everywhere. You can't go to a restaurant anymore as a family without screens, glowing rectangles blaring at you. And so we are just trying to be vigilant in helping our kids navigate a world of screens. And so I remember being with the kids at a yogurt land here in Southern California. We were getting frozen yogurt one afternoon, and we're sitting there, and the rule for our family, generally speaking, is that whenever we're sharing food, we put all technology away. You can't have your phone out on the table, and even at the dinner table, it's like you can't even have it in your pocket. But so we're sitting there, and it was me and I think 4 of our 5 kids having yogurt, and we're talking and we're laughing and joking with each other, whatever, and having a good time. And there was a mom who came in, and you know how you just casually observe people. You're not staring at them, but you casually observe people when they walk in or whatever. And they just got their yogurt, mom and her daughter, and daughter's probably 5 years old, and they got their yogurt, paid for it, and then they sat like right in my field of vision, right? And they're sitting there. And just as I'm interacting with our kids and just casually observing, I just noticed this mom, she pulls out her smartphone, and the entire time she's got the spoon kind of feeding herself her yogurt. So the one hand's occupied with that, and then her other hand is occupied with the smartphone, and she's just kind of scrolling with her thumb. And then sitting right there at that small little Yogurtland table is her daughter, who's like 5 years old. And I just watched the daughter sit there and eat her yogurt in complete silence. Like mom wasn't interacting with her one bit. Instead, the phone had her attention. They didn't talk at all. And you could see the little girl, like she'd kind of look at her mom, and she'd look away, and she'd have a bite of yogurt. And it reminded me of that title of Sherry Turkle's book, Alone Together. They were alone together. Yeah. And so I narrated that for our kids. And, you have to be careful with this. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't like, oh, hey, kids, look at that horrible mom. It wasn't that thing. Yeah. But it was like, hey, guys, notice that. And they noticed it, and we've kind of helped give them eyes to see that when they're out and about. They notice it, and then once the mom and the daughter left, we talked through that, and I thought that was a really important teaching time because I wanted them to help. I wanted the kids to see, and here was a powerful illustration of how technology can cut you off from one another. And it actually you can see over time a life that's shaped that way by the screen and that's lived on the screen can actually lead to a life of loneliness, and it cuts us off from each other. You fail to take this opportunity for relationship where a mom and daughter sitting across sharing some, sugary treats. This is an enjoyable time. Could have some rich conversation and where the mom could be looking the daughter in the eyes and asking her how her day was and talking, and instead the screen has her attention.
And this situation, has happened. I mean, I wasn't there for that one, but I'm sure everyone listening knows this story. They've seen it at a restaurant or anywhere where people are together but distracted by their phones. And the important part about teaching our kids to notice that stuff is, like you said, not to be judgmental of look at these dumb people around us, but look at why we have the habits we do. Look at why, this is why actually we tell you guys to put away your phones, because look at it when you don't do that.
You can see the impact right in front of your eyes. And so that's why we're trying to narrate that for them, because they can see the impact.
Yeah, and if we didn't point it out to them, and this is something we've, especially with technology, that we've tried to point out to them a lot because we want them to have healthy habits with technology as they grow into adults. But so we've pointed it out to them and narrate, oh, look, like that family of 4 that was at the table next to us didn't talk to each other at all, other than like pass something. But all 4 people were on their screens the whole time, and so this is a time. And then we can say, do you think their dinner was as meaningful and rich as our dinner was together? Do you think they even realized they were eating? Do you think they even realized they were with each other? Yeah. And what a missed opportunity to hear about each other's day and all those sorts of things. So teaching them to have eyes to see it. And with our kids, we've done this a lot. And of course it happens everywhere. That one time in the grocery line, I had our youngest little guy with me, and he was helping me load groceries up on the thing. And I noticed him looking at the dad and son in front of us. And anyways, when the dad and son got their groceries left, and now the checker's scanning ours, and then Jonah whispers to me, "Mom, did you see that son in front of us?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "Did you see? He was on his phone the whole time. He didn't talk to his dad once." And I said, "Oh yeah, I did notice that." And then he said he missed a time to talk to his dad. Now, Jonah's, probably 8 at this. So an 8-year-old having that reflection is not typical for an 8-year-old, that he would, but it's because and of course he's hearing us talk with his older siblings too, but Jonah now has eyes to see it because we've pointed out and we've narrated, look what's happening, and then talked about the implications of it so that even he's seeing it and troubled by the technology addicted teenager in front of us in line, at the and I think actually that's what he said. He was like, he is so addicted to his phone.
Yeah, and now what he's doing is he's narrating back to you.
Yeah,
and that's where when your kid is able to then narrate what's going on around you, that helps you to see that this is effective. They're now able to see these things as well. That's why narrating is such a helpful tool. And it can be, we've just given a couple examples here, and hopefully that gives you a feel for what we're talking about. But sometimes we narrate after the fact. So it might be we're out in some social situation and there are other kids around, and a kid could maybe be acting very well, or a kid's acting naughty, as mom likes to say. A kid is acting sinful or is disobeying their parents, and then we'll take the time afterwards to say, hey, Jonah, or hey, Ella, I wanted to see if you recognize this, but did you see when, Johnny was saying this to his parents? Did you hear that? And we'll go back and narrate the situation and either highlight the virtue, because that's important. And that's probably, we don't do that as often. I think there's just kind of a natural tendency to see the bad more. And so sometimes we'll see the bad and we'll point out the bad, but also just pointing out great examples. And we've done that where you're like, hey, you see the way that, that kid behaved? That was so sweet what they did. Or they were so respectful to the adults around them, or something like that. So it's not just narrating the bad, but narrating the good, highlighting the virtue. But so we've done it when it comes to other kids, behavior. Just again, helping the kids to see examples of righteousness or sinfulness. Sometimes we've narrated on issues. So it might be a social issue or a public policy issue or politics. And maybe it has to do with, and it could be a situation where someone's watching a news show, or even we're scrolling through social media and we see something and we bring the kids over and go, hey, look at this. And we kind of talk it through them. We're narrating it for them. And so this can have really broad application in terms of how you use it. But the idea is you're narrating, you're telling the story of reality that's unfolding all around us. You're applying the Christian worldview to it. You're applying Christian truth, your theology, right? And I'm just thinking, when we talk about the food situation or the dinner situation where everybody's on their devices, it's a perfect opportunity to talk about our theology of food, which we've talked about in a recent episode, right, with picky eaters. But we have a theology that informs even our meals. And our meals are rich times, and they facilitate fellowship amongst family members. And so this is why we don't want to sit and be on a screen while we're sharing a meal. But these are the different ways that we can narrate, ultimately to bring Christian truth to bear on that particular thing and to help our kids see God's truth. And I think, one of the benefits of this is to help our kids see how relevant God's truth is to every single area of life, that the scriptures speak to every square inch of reality.
Yeah. That is where I think, just thinking about that Deuteronomy passage about you do it when you're walking along the road, when you lie down, when you wake up, which maybe sometimes we read it and that's overwhelming because you think, oh gosh, like I'm doing this all the time. Like again, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm leading a Bible study all day long? Well, I can't do that. So then, now what do I do? But it broadens the view to, this is about living life with our kids, which of course requires that they're with us, for good amounts of time. So that when we're in these situations, just living life, that we have opportunities all around us. It's not really that we have to go and search for them. They're actually all around us. Like I think about times where I picked up kids from soccer or basketball or whatever event they're at the time. And just, I remember one time picking a daughter up after soccer, and there was a little team meeting afterwards. And I watched just how all the girls got up. No one went to thank coach at the end. And when we got to the car, I just talked to my daughter and said, did you notice, I've noticed on the team, that no one really thanks coach at the end of practice every night. And, coach is actually a volunteer. He's a dad who's works all day. And I don't know, what he does, but he works all day and then comes here and spends this time with you girls. And I just noticed no one thanks him. And I wonder if he feels like you guys even care, And these things are happening all the time, at Target, that,
it could
everywhere.
be even mom or dad comes home from work and you sit and have dinner and you share something that happened at work today. You narrate what went on at work, which is, number one, interesting to your kids, to give them insight into your work, but then it's an opportunity again to teach and narrate as well.
Yeah, so. It opens the whole world to, if you're starting a business and bringing your kids into how you think about consumer, it's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's more that we have to put our heads down and not look up. Rather than that we lack opportunities. And this is what discipleship is. This is what God wants us to do with our kids.
Yeah, and we don't have to think of, the way I teach them the faith is to sit them down in some kind of academic setting, or they have to be in a classroom, or they have to be sitting at the table, and we have to get our books out. And no, we're teaching as we go. And I think that narrating helps you to do that. I think another benefit too is it will begin to, if you start trying to be intentional on this and you look for those opportunities, it's going to force growth in your life as well, because you may realize, gosh, I'm not as equipped to offer much biblical insight on this issue. Or I know the scriptures talk about this, but I don't know where. And so it will help reveal even some of your own inadequacies, which is good, because that kind of discomfort will help foster growth in you. If you want to make yourself grow, force yourself to be in uncomfortable kind of situations, right? And so this can help you grow, and it's going to require you to grow in your knowledge of the Christian worldview. But then the benefit is that you will see more of reality integrated with your faith. You'll see that Christianity is knowledge of reality. It's not just this thing that we do on Sundays. It's not just a private, personal relationship with Jesus, but my Christian faith informs every aspect. So there's growth that will happen in you as you're trying to, try to narrate the world around you for your kids.
Which for me, this is how I've grown the most, is I think is just as I've been a mom and just living life with the kids and learning along with them. It's just being with them and trying to, see people, be aware, and growing with the kids. These dialogues help. The conversations we have with the kids, and that you and I have, especially about just life situations that come up, they push me and help me to grow and have helped me to grow so much. And it just isn't, for me, has been an unintimidating way of thinking, oh, this is how I can, disciple the kids, just to grow with them. Not that I have to be the super Christian and the perfect mom or have all the right answers, but I can wonder with them. I can just bring up a situation. Did you guys see that? And not have an answer for it, but just, did you guys see it? What do you guys think about it? And yeah, I'm not sure, but it's something to think about, isn't it? And even sometimes just leave it there. But it's a good way to grow, and it's a good way to grow together.
Yeah, and I think in addition, just growing your, I guess, being intentional in what you read and what you study and what you watch and what you listen to. To help you grow in this, because I'm thinking of an analogy that may be helpful here, but it's a sports analogy, and it's the idea of an athlete who maybe comes into the league. Let's say you got a quarterback who's drafted from college, and they're in the NFL, right? And what does that guy do? Well, of course he practices, but he also studies the playbook. And then he studies game film, right? And that rookie quarterback will eventually get better. But his rookie season, when he's talking about the game, he will say things like, well, the game is just moving so fast, right? And then that's why he goes and watches game film, so he can slow it down and watch it and see things that he couldn't see in the moment. But then, 5 years down the road, that same quarterback who used to say the game was moving so fast will say things like, the game is really slowed down. Now, he doesn't mean literally that people are not running as fast anymore. No, actually what he means is he's now able to see things, to see much more than he was able to see at that time as a rookie. And in the same way, I think it's a great analogy for us. As we study more, as we study the Christian worldview, as we, read the scriptures, as we learn from thoughtful, insightful Christians who are narrating through their books or their podcasts or whatever, the culture around us, we also, things can slow down for us.
Yeah.
We can see more. And when we have that ability to see more, we can then teach more to our kids. So I think there's just a need for us to if we say, gosh, I'm just not good at this, that's okay. You can get better. Just like an athlete can get better at their craft, you and I can get better at this as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to remember, that this narrating part is a skill that we can get better at. And it's a skill we'll see our kids get better at. Like I said, that story of Jonah in the grocery store is just him learning to see things.
Yeah.
But that this is part of discipleship, and not that noticing things in the culture and around us is sufficient enough. We need the time with our kids in the scripture. We need to study Jesus and know who he is and know how he treats people. So then we have all of this knowledge that then when we go out and we see Christians not treating people like Jesus, we recognize it because we know how Jesus treats people. Yeah. And these sorts of things of it's not that we're saying this Deuteronomy 6 means not studying, because it includes that, of course, but that this narrating part of living life together is an important piece of showing our kids that it includes all of life, that this is all of reality, that what scripture talks about isn't just how we live on Sunday morning. It's not just our time at the kitchen table reading our Bible together. It's about our whole entire lives.
Yeah. So I think what we're saying is that the narrating is the tool. Narrating is a tool to get that Christian truth out there, but we've got to know Christian truth.
Yeah.
And so that's where, maybe we could end this with some book recommendations. In fact, I've got one right off the top of my head that I think will be really helpful in this, but it's a book. It's called A Practical Guide to Culture. Practical Guide to Culture, Helping the Next Generation Navigate Today's World. Get that book. Read that book if you haven't already.
Who's the author of that book
I believe it was Stone Street and Cochle, I think.
Cochle.
Yeah. But that's the kind of, obviously, I mean, that book flows out of our lives, right? And kind of how we approach this. So that, yes, we do recommend that. But then reading other thoughtful Christians. I think for those who want just a good kind of grounding in the Christian worldview and the Christian story, is Greg Cochle's book, The Story of Reality, is a really good one. I think for those, if you want to get better at kind of cultural analysis and seeing how ideas play themselves out, reading books by someone like Os Guinness is a very insightful Christian is a good way to go. There's others. The recent books by Rod Dreher, we recommend those. And just reading thoughtful, intelligent Christians who know how to take who know the Christian worldview and then know how to apply it to life are very helpful. And so anyway, the narrating then becomes the tool that you then use as a way to really get that Christian truth into your kids. So hopefully that's helpful for folks. We kind of wanted to spend this podcast on this tool because we found it so helpful. We've used it so often with our kids. And it takes practice, but the more you do it, the better you get.
Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.